And when I looked at this, I was like, okay, so everyone's got a different pack and they're going to set off on their own path. And I love you talking about them writing their own story. And when I went back to the pack analogy, it was like, it's about writing your own story. But when you have this pack and you start, off on your own and you're independent and all that, there's a lot that can happen with that pack, right? And I think there's things that you can take out of it, like some past trauma, to your point, like get over it. Like there's stuff that you can put down because you don't have to carry it. And I think there's stuff that people put in unwillingly, like, oh, this is mine, I'm going to carry it. It's like, why? Yeah. And then also stuff that people can put in your pack. I think it's being very protective, right? And so I looked at this, I was like, man, what a great analogy, because you have walked your own path, you've written your own story, and you've probably had people that have, said good things and bad things. And, there's been trials and all these things. And it's like just your pack of what you carry. And maybe it's literal and figuratively for you, because, you kind of travel around with just a backpack and away we go. But it just, I love that analogy, and it just kind of carried throughout. So talk a little bit more about the pack. And
yeah, it's so good. There's so many places. Very well said, Pat. And there's so many places to go with it. And like for me, I only can talk about my journey and who I am and what I think is right for me. But I think in general, once again, I didn't have money growing up. I start the whole book talking just so everyone kind of knows the start of my life. This isn't for me to feel bad for me. I'm just setting the table here of like, I didn't know what new clothes were. Probably until the age of like 12, 13, 14, maybe years old, right? Like I would go to the Goodwill closet of our church with my mom, and she would like pick out clothes for me for school. So like, and I didn't think that was like a problem, honestly. That for me was like, okay, that's what we do, right?
Get new clothes,
So we didn't have that, but as I've talked about a couple of times, I did have parents that were super supportive and open, and so that's my backpack, right? And I can't do anything about that backpack. That's just what I was born with here on planet Earth. But I think as I look at life, and if I was going to advise a young person, or like my nieces and nephews right now in McLaren, one thing that's been helpful is I've tried to keep my backpack as light as possible, honestly. And I think that's been a huge advantage to me is, and sometimes you can't do that. You know what I mean? Life choices, certain circumstances you can't control. But I would say I have the heaviest backpack I've ever had now. Why? Because I have a wife. I have a 1-year-old. There's other things I can't just like, back it up, move this thing over to the Caribbean right this second, right? And so, but I would say for a lot of eras of my life, it was pretty light, and I think that worked to my advantage of taking risks and kind of going for it in life. We talk about it briefly here, but there's this moment where everything kind of falls apart, right? So I was going to get my MBA. I lose my scholarship. I'd quit my job in Boston. Survivor originally kind of wanted me. They think I'm lying to them. So like everything collapsed. I'm actually living here in Jacksonville. Everything kind of collapses. Fortunately, I'd had all these little moments in life, and I'd always thought about like, I should go. I always want to move down to the Caribbean, like sling some drinks. I love that movie Cocktail. I don't know if you remember it with Tom Cruise. That was like my favorite show, favorite movie. Watched that thing like 100 times. So here I am in this moment of like everything falls apart. And I moved to the island of St. John. I say that story because it was an awesome reset in my life. I'm probably like 20, it's before Amazing Race. I'm like 22 maybe, living down there. And I say this to this day to my wife. I'm like, listen, if all fails, we can pack this thing up, go to the island of St. John. I will go bartend and we'll have a ball. You know what I'm saying? and I mean this all seriousness. It's like, it's for, if you do something like that, I think that set the table being like, that was my rock bottom. And that rock bottom wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? I created a bad situation, turned it into a positive. And so we've talked about it a couple times. One of the things one of the non-negotiables for my son, McLaren, is that he will do a foreign exchange in high school. He'll do another one in college. There's no question about it, because I just want him to get perspective on the world. I want him to see the world, but I also want him to have that energy to go do some cool stuff out there, and then realize like, okay, cool. When you know that that's your fallback plan, like for me, my fallback plan to this day is to move to the island of St. John and be a bartender, right?
It's not a bad backup.
It's not a bad backup. It's a great backup. And so every risk I'm going for becomes a little like, what's the worst case scenario? That's my bottom, right? And so if you can do that if you can find your bottom that's cool, that you're happy with, I don't know, it's a good way to go through life.
I love it.